Hello and welcome to the podcast. Every moment is sacred, where we interweave meditation and healing into everyday life. I am your host, Rain Elizabeth Stickney. Now, let us begin. Hi, welcome back. I am so glad you're here, and I am so happy to introduce to you Jessie Krebs. She wrote a beautiful bio in the first person, and I am going to read that to you momentarily. First, a warning. Especially for young audiences, I want you to know that this is an adult-only episode. In this episode, we mention some mature topics that are not suited for those under 18. If you are a young member of my audience, you can check with an adult to double check. If you are an adult who knows your child or someone you care for listens to this podcast, you can listen first and make your own decision. I will share the topics that are included in this episode: infant and childhood sexual abuse, and pedophilia. So please take good care. These are adult topics, and Jessie Krebs very vulnerably, beautifully, compassionately shares about her life story in this snippet of a longer conversation. Part 2 will air next week. And I have had so much heartfelt consideration in how to edit this particular conversation because it is so important. And Jessie is a celebrity that I wanted to be very responsible about how I share the words we enjoyed together. The words meaning our conversation, our connection. She is such a beautiful soul, and she has overcome so much in her life and has shared a wealth of knowledge with so many people supporting wildlife excellence. She helps people learn how to survive in the wild. She has survived in the wild. She has been on Alone season 9. She has been on National Geographic's Migrations, both reality shows and both excellent shows to watch and learn from. And in the longer version of this conversation, which you will hear next week, she goes into what it was like to be on those shows and what she learned from them. But first, I wanted to give you a taste because it has been a long time coming. Jessie and I connected back in June of 2023, and as of today that I am recording this greeting to you, it is September 2023. So I apologize for the long wait. It is very exciting, and like I said, it's been a heartfelt consideration of how to meet you at the trailhead and walk responsibly and honorably across the land that Jessie and I traverse. In her words, this is who Jessie Krebs is. Natural landscapes and the beings inhabiting them have been a source of so much healing and growth in my life. My experience began with mom's love, but was soon tainted by infant and childhood sexual abuse, along with a few dashes of abandonment. Escaping outside to explore and distract myself became a primary coping mechanism. At 18, I joined the Air Force, where I learned a lot of hard skills and concepts, but also buried my emotions even deeper. Those emotions were excavated over 11 years while working as a wilderness therapy guide, where I learned to be a child of the universe again, open to possibility and reveling in the blossoming of my clients and peers. Now I've come full circle. I feel loved and supported and get to teach the techniques I learned in the military, tempered with joy and excitement. sharing what I've experienced of the natural world with others that wish to connect and learn as well. The wilderness doesn't judge, and in our crazy society, that's a novel and startling place to be. No judgment? How awesome is that? It opens the door to a kind of freedom, challenge, and experience we can't find in the manufactured human world. Through a connection with wilderness, we can heal parts of ourselves we may not even consciously know we are in need of. I did. Now I'm the founder of O.W.L.S Skills, where one of my primary goals is to educate and empower women and other underrepresented demographics in the skills of surviving emergency situations in global wilderness environments. At O.W.L.S, Outdoorsy Women Learning Survival, I work as the head instructor for in-person classes on a wide variety of survival topics and offer private training courses for all demographics. Yep, including the male-identifying folks out there, ranging from a few minutes to a few weeks. Occasionally, I've also found myself on a reality show, History's Alone Season 9, and National Geographic's Migrations, or in some kind of online educator role, like my masterclass. Generally, if I'm offered a chance for some kind of adventure outside, it's hard for me to turn it down. And now, folks, I bring you Jessie Krebs. To support this show, please rate, review, share, subscribe, or follow wherever you listen. And if you have any personal or constructive feedback for me, send me an email, healing@rainelizabeth.org. I answer all of my email. I care what you think. I care about your experience. And this show is a collaboration. The more feedback I get from you, the more I know what you want and what you enjoy, and the more I can give it back. Thank you again for listening, and here is the very beginning of a long conversation I truly enjoyed with the dear, wonderful, fabulous, knowledgeable, heartfelt, soulful, wise Jessie Krebs.
Hey, Jessie.
Hi. How's it going, Rain?
Oh my gosh. I just feel so honored that I get to meet you in person and that you just came into my life miraculously. Our neighbor called us and said, hey, Jessie Krebs is going to be around. Can she use your land for this course? And then here I am just talking with you. And so I can say that I'm doing very well because I'm just in the magic of life.
Nice. Yes. It's amazing how that works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same. It's like it's divine timing though. That seems to happen a lot in life as long as we're open to the path and the journey. And sometimes I can get very caught up in this is where I want to go. This is where I'm headed. And I'll start going that way and start hitting roadblocks. And that's the universe trying to tell me that's not the path right now. There's a better path for you. There's some place where both your skills and who you are as a human are going to be better utilized. And there's something for you to learn. And you're not on the right path right now. And so hitting those roadblocks, I have to remember sometimes that, hey, that means take a right or a left or look behind you and path is somewhere else. And that's awesome. And so it's when things like this happen, it's just another example of the universe saying, hey, stay on the path. If you're on the path, it's amazing, just absolutely incredible.
Yes.
What can happen?
Yes. And how do you know when you're on the path?
When I see things like that, they're like the trail markers, if you're on a trail, it's got blazes and things. And so when things like that happen, it's paying attention and having awareness that did happen. And that tells me that I'm on the right track, that this is where I'm supposed to be. And it's amazing how many times that can happen for me. And still I'll hit roadblocks and get like, wow, right? Like I'm all upset about it. And it's like, I still forget like, hey, it's just telling you to turn, right? You're not on the path, just turn. That's all it's doing. And I'll still get grumbly and like impatient because I had a goal and I wanted to get there. And it's like, no, that just isn't the path. You may get there, or maybe there's now going to be something completely different. And inevitably it's going to be better. There's going to be a reason and there's going to be a purpose for that. And it's funny how much I'll still kind of buck the system or that divine timing in the universe and be like, no, but I wanted to do blah, blah, blah,
Right.
So yeah, it's things like this literally that tell me I'm on the path. It's like, oh, okay. That's where I'm supposed to be right now.
I'm glad we're on this path together.
Me too.
So I know that you are a survival expert and you've done a bunch of stuff in your life. In your own words, in your own experience, you were born, you're here. What has happened that has brought you here in a nutshell?
Probably a lot of trials and tribulation, which I feel like is definitely not unique to me. I feel like everybody has some form of that. I used to love mom and I was raised by a single mom in Michigan, and she's been on a spiritual journey for a long time and never been able to emotionally really connect with that journey. Once she talks about one time she's had an emotional and a sensation and a feeling of connectiveness. And otherwise it's been mostly intellectual, and she's been chasing that, and she's 70 now for a long time. So in my youth, when I was a kid and growing up, she would take me to Unitarian Universalist is what I was raised. And we were exposed to Joseph Campbell on like PBS or something, and The Power of Myth, and his conversations with Bill Moyers that we would watch. And so that concept of having something that challenges us, that takes us from childhood into adolescence and from adolescence into adulthood. And so his theory was that all of us have that, like whether it was something like with the Maasai going out and literally killing a lion with a spear, from adolescent to adulthood, or whether it was the divorce of your parents, right? Or having to move from one school to another, or whatever that is. We will all find a way to use those as markers of, okay, that was a transition for me from this stage to this stage. And transitions are traumatic inherently. They can be really struggle. They can be a hard thing to do. So my transitions were from mom she was going to give me up for adoption. She was going to be a single mother at 20 years old. And her father really advocated like, hey, you should not be an unmarried mother in the 70s. So she was going to give me up for adoption, and the nurse, she said, don't let me see the baby after it's born. I don't want to see the child. And a nurse came in and brought me in and put me in her arms while she was sleeping. Don't know if she just didn't get the notice or she was trying to set things up here. So initially, that was probably something with mom and I, even in the womb, of I was going to be going away. But instead I was brought back. And so then it was she and I, and she wasn't ready, right? My crib when I was a child was in a drawer, right, that she put blankets in. So that happened. And then she found out her high school sweetheart, they put out wedding invitations, and then he was cheating on her. So he married someone else. And I have a half sister who I met when I was 10, who was about 9 months younger than I am. And so I grew up with just a single mom, and unfortunately her mother had divorced and remarried, and the guy was a pedophile. Ooh. And mom, being an unexpected mother at 20, she would leave me with grandma and her new husband a fair amount of the time. So my earliest memories were of infant and childhood sexual abuse, and they lived out in the country that my biological grandfather had built. And I would sneak out of the house a lot and just run off to the woods and try to be gone as much as I could. So basically he couldn't get a hold of me. And so I loved being in the woods there, but I hated being in the house. So that quickly started this process with me where I loved being outdoors. And so then being a survivor of infant and childhood sexual abuse. And then at 10, I met my blood father, my biological father, and I had siblings I didn't know about till then. And whole new family, so trying to adjust, and they had different beliefs and different ways of doing things. So I felt somewhat shut down when I was in those, because mom would she'd hike the Himalayas, ridden elephants in Nepal and safaris, Taj Mahal. We'd gone to Greece when I was 12 and Europe, and traveled around for 6 weeks. So my mom was kind of a very worldly, she got her master's in sociology. And so that going to my other family members, it was very different. They weren't nearly as worldly as that. And they this is what you believe, this is what you do. And so I pretty much kept my mouth shut and just kind of blended in.
Did you live with your father in that part of your family?
No, I lived with mom. So mom raised me, but I have an adoptive father, Michael. And so he would have, they divorced pretty quickly though. They were married for just like 2 or 3 years. And then they divorced. And so he was my legal father. So I would spend my weekends, every other weekend or so was spent with Mike.
Okay.
Tricky.
So you have kind of a close, like an extended, but close family.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It was very confusing me as a child trying to draw a family tree, like in school, because I had step siblings and half siblings. And there's 3 women I call mom. Only one is mama. But 3 that I call mom and at least 2 that I call dad. And so I have many sets of grandparents, most of which are gone now.
Well, just to set the scene here and the resonance, so much of your story is my story too.
Really?
And with different details. My mother did not want to give me up for adoption, but she did try to abort me and the abortion didn't work. And she struggled being a parent because it wasn't her conscious time to become a parent. It's something that happened. And there are other parallels too that are resonant with what your story is. It's just very interesting to know I'm not alone. We're not alone. Blended families happen. Other caregivers with the best intentions can still be harmful to a young person.
Absolutely.
Nature can be a refuge, can be an easy escape, like get out there to the trees or to the grass. Or when I was a child, I really liked to make potions. So I'm very drawn to herbology and that sort of thing. But there's just a resonance in what you're sharing. And I want you to know that.
Absolutely. And that really calls to me a lot of my healing. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell my voice, but I'm getting teary-eyed now. And that happens a fair amount with me. And I think a lot of it's because emotions weren't safe and I shut them down as a child. And so now it's so freeing and so nice to simply let them flow and to let that go. But it was so wonderful years later getting into wilderness therapy and working with so many clients. And it's absolutely awful. And at the same time, it was so wonderful meeting so many people who have had traumas, a lot of sexual abuse as well, but trauma of some kind. And to hear that statement, you're not alone, right? And that's so beautiful and so wonderful just to know that you're not alone in that journey, because it can be so isolating. And for so long, I let it isolate me and thought I was alone. So that's such a beautiful thing, right? And such a wonderful part of the healing of saying we can come together, we can support each other, and having examples out there of people who are strong, who came through that and came through the other side and said, I'm not going to let this break me. It maybe broke me for a while, but I put it back together. And that bone, when it healed back together, is more powerful now than it was before. And that's a wonderful thing. So thank you for sharing too, and being a healer.
We're in it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are not alone, folks. You heard it from Jessie Krebs. You are not alone. I am not alone. She is not alone. We are not alone. We're together and we can walk this path of healing and mindfulness together. We can learn and grow together. And even the word we defines that we are not alone. We are a we. We are here together. Perhaps you have experienced trauma in your life, or maybe you know someone who has. Jessie is such a wonderful spokesperson of the strength and endurance a person can have in their own unique healing process along their own personal healing path. Part 2 next week takes us into her description of what it was like to be in the military. How did she get there, and what had her choose that part of her path? And then how did that path continue into wilderness therapy? She describes what hard skills are, as well as soft skills, and how they're both important and what a beautiful dance they do together when held gratefully, gracefully and with love. You will also get to hear a couple of things that make me smile and twinkle, because they're not the kinds of things that I usually hear from people on this show or on other podcasts in general. Jessie has her own names for the water, the wind, and the moon. And she also tells delightful stories of her cats. I can't wait to share the rest with you. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening. It has been a great joy to have your presence here in this podcast. I welcome you to celebrate the joy and wisdom in your life exactly as it is. And I welcome you to feel loved, fully loved, exactly as you are. www.rainelizabeth.org